Yo, what's up everyone? And Nathaniel, I'm sure you're probably watching this. We're back with episode 10, and in this one we're going to be adding in bloom. So then the angle of the bloom is going to be different compared to when we're like crouching and standing still. You can see the bloom isn't that much, and then when we start sprinting, standing up, without aiming down the sights, the bloom is way more. So with that out of the way, let's just get into this video. Okay, so before we get started, there's just one thing we need to do, which is in the animator, where we've got the transition to and from walking to crouching. So if you click on these transitions here, you just want to take off the conditions where walking is true for both. And so with that done, we can get started adding in the bloom. And now what we're going to do is on our weapon, scroll down to the bottom, add a component, and then this is going to be a weapon bloom script. And then it's going to create an add. And now we can just double click this to open it up. So what we're going to do in here is, because the bloom's going to change depending if we're walking or crouching, aiming down sights and stuff like that, we're going to start off with a serialized field, and this is going to be a float for our default bloom angle. And then after this we're going to want to have the multipliers for if we're walking and stuff. So I'm going to have another serialized field, it's going to be a float. And then I'm just going to add a walk bloom multiplier. And I'm just going to duplicate this line and then change the walk to say crouch. Duplicate it again, change the crouch to be sprint. And then duplicate it one more time, and then it's going to be ADS. And I'm just going to put some default values in here. So the bloom angle I'm just going to set to 3. The walk bloom multiplier I'm going to set to 1.5. And the crouch bloom multiplier I'm going to set to 0.5. because it's going to be less if we're crouching. The sprint bloom multiplier, I'm going to set this to 2. And then the ADS bloom multiplier, I'm going to set this to 0.5 as well. And now to know if we're walking or aiming down sights and stuff like that, we're going to need references to our state managers. So the first one I'm going to add in here is just the movement state manager, and then call this movement. And then now I'm going to add in the aim state manager, and then just call this aiming. And in the start we can get these components just by going movement, set it equal to get component, and it's going to be in the parent actually, because this is on the weapon and then that's on the player. And then we can just get it by typing in the movement state manager. And then the same again basically for the aiming, it's going to be equal get component in parent, and then it's just going to be the aim state manager. And now with all the variables out of the way, we can start writing the code. And we're not going to need this update function, so I'm just going to replace it with a public, and it's going to return a vector 3. And then in here we're going to pass in a transform, and then this is going to be the barrel position. And before we actually get started, there's one more variable I forgot, and this is just going to be a float for the current bloom. And then this is just going to be changing depending on these multipliers and the default bloom angle. But then also, before we get started, because in the movement state manager the current state and for the aim state manager the current state are both private, we need to set those to public. So if we just click on the class here and press F12, it's going to open up that class. So I've got the states here, so this current state we just want to set this to public. And then we can go back into the bloom script and then press F12 on the aim state manager and do the same thing here. And now we're finally ready to start writing the code. So the first thing we're going to check is if we're in the idle state. So we can just go if movement.current state and see if this is equal to movement.idle. And then if this is true, what we're going to do is set the current bloom equal to the default bloom angle. Next we're going to check else if, and this is going to be the movement.current state is equal to the movement.walk state. And if this is true, we're just going to go current bloom equals to the default bloom angle and times this by the walk bloom multiplier. And now we can just duplicate this line again just to make this a bit quicker, because all we need to do is change this walk here to be run. And now instead of timesing by the walk bloom multiplier, we just need to times it by the sprint bloom multiplier. And now we're going to check for the crouching, but this one's going to be a little bit different because we can be crouching and being idle or crouching and walking. So we're just first going to check if the current state is the crouching state. And now we're going to open up the brackets here, and first of all we're going to check if we're idle in the crouch state. So we can just go if movement.direction.magnitude is equal to 0. Then what we can do is just set the current bloom equal to the default bloom angle and times this by the crouch bloom multiplier. And then else, what we're going to do is just set the current bloom and then set this equal to the default bloom angle again, times this by the crouch bloom multiplier again, but then finally we're going to times this by the walk bloom multiplier. And now that's all done for the movement, we just need to check if we're aiming down the sights or not. So we just do the same thing basically, we'll go if the aiming dot current state is equal to the aiming dot aim state, or mine's just called aim, and then I'm going to need another equals in here. And now for this one it's going to be slightly different, so same again, we're just going to get the current bloom, but this time we're going to times equal, and then it's going to be the ADS bloom multiplier. And this is because we're already going to have our current bloom set here, and then so we times equal by the ADS bloom multiplier, so this goes on top of all of it. And now we've got our current bloom set, we're going to get some random floats between the minus current bloom and the normal current bloom. So we can just do float, and this we're going to do random x, because we're going to get a random float for each of the axes. And then I'm going to set this equal to random.range, and this is going to be between the minus current bloom and then the current bloom. And I'm going to duplicate this line 2 more times, change the second one to say y, and then change the last one to be z. And now we can add these together in a vector 3. So I'm going to have vector 3 and then just call this random rotation. And then it's going to be set equal to a new vector 3. And then in here we're just going to have the random x, the random y, and then finally the random z. And now we've got our random rotation. What we're going to do is we're going to want to return, but then we're going to return the barrel positions dot local Euler angles, and then we're going to add that to the random rotation. And you can see now when we try to return this, there's an error because I haven't actually given this a name, so I'm just going to call this bloom angle. And finally, the last thing we want to do is in the weapon manager, we're going to get a reference to that weapon bloom class. So I'm just going to do it under where we've got the ammo. So call weapon bloom, call this bloom, and then get it in the start. So just bloom, set this equal to get component, and then it's going to be weapon bloom. So now we've got the component. What we're going to do in the fire method, after where we look at the aim position, we're going to set the barrel position dot local Euler angles, and then set this equal to the bloom dot bloom, or bloom angle, and then we need to pass in the barrel position. So that's everything we need to do, so I'm just going to quickly test this out. Alright, so now if we test this, you can see if we crouch down, aim and shoot, you can see that the spread's not very much. I'm going to reload the clip now, start sprinting and shoot up in the air, and then you can see the spread's way more. So that's everything for this video, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.